I know that criticizing artists will help them to improve, and as long as the criticism is respectful, you are in the right place and you're doing the right thing. However, even though I know that my critiques are respectful, I do believe that I struggle to critique ITZY in a way that I don't struggle to critique anyone else. I feel like ITZY is such a special group to me that even though I don't think I am like a midzy myself, I do hold ITZY quite dear to my heart. If Ditto is the sound of what my teenage years sound like, then I think for somebody else, ITZY sounds like their childhood, because whenever I listen to ITZY's old discography, there's something so bright, there's something so colorful about it, something that feels so alive, and in a way that you can only have this liveliness in your childhood, because I guess it's safe to say that the world felt a lot more brighter when we were kids. To me, ITZY's discography feels like someone's happy childhood. It feels like idealism, and it feels like the soundtrack of someone's childhood and teen years overall, and it just, I don't know, for some reason it irks me to criticize it because it sounds like the childhood that so many people kind of yearn for, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like ITZY and their discography, especially their earlier discography, fits, it created a space for a lot of tween girls and boys, and basically everyone in between, to have a space and music that is friendly towards their age demographic. And of course, I've not listened to every early ITZY song, and again, I do feel like their big hits are a big indication that their songs provided music for people around that age demographic, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Once again, the gap between being a tween and a teenager and being a young adult is closing, and teens and tweens don't exactly have spaces that are dedicated to them because, again, the disappearance of places, and I had to double check if that was even the right term in the first place, and it was, so that's good. Moving on, it's just not locations and hangout places for teens and tweens. It's also media and activities in general, right? When we were kids, there was a plethora of activities. There was a plethora of shows that we could watch that would fit into the age ranges that tweens and teenagers span into, right? But now there's a disappearance of that, and there's a lack of that. And now, instead of, I don't know, exploring, I don't know, kitty makeup, now young girls are going straight into skincare, and just instead of having shows that cater to them, some are just straight up watching Euphoria, and no, you're too young for that. So that being said, I think ITZY was a group, and is a group, that still stayed true to creating a space for teens and tweens, and I don't think we talk about that enough because we fortunately were able to experience having third place locations for us to grow up in, and kids nowadays don't have that, so they rely on growing up faster because that's where they think they're going to find their entertainment or hobbies. And we still have to really focus on creating third place hangouts and activities and media, so young teenagers and tweens can have a space to grow up, and they have the safety of being able to grow up with their innocence is still intact, and also grow up with messaging that is about self-love and self-esteem, and being a teen and a tween is a very tumultuous period in a lot of people's lives. In fact, I would argue in everyone's lives. So having like music that actively talks about self-love and self-confidence and self-esteem, I think that would really help to it would help anyone, but it would help those kids in that time period of their lives. And I think having more musicians and more artists that cater to that target demographic are very important. And again, this isn't to criticize any artist that started out young and now is an adult and caters to and basically grew up with their music. You're not responsible for that. Again, remember, parents are responsible for what their child and teenager consumes. So again, I feel like I lost track because the main point of this video was to talk about ITZY and appreciate them, because I think I haven't really talked about ITZY since 2024, and that is a grave mistake on my part, and I apologize. And I do feel like ITZY is still a very special group, and they are one of the most important groups to come out of the fourth generation, in my opinion. And again, I do feel like this video is here to hype and to just celebrate ITZY as a whole. But I do feel like I also want to talk about the way ITZY has grown up, not just physically, but as a group and artistically. And I do feel like them growing up has kind of led to some fear and the way people talk about ITZY currently as we speak. And I do feel like the way that they have grown up and the way their music looks like now, I do feel like some of it does come from a fear of them growing up. And I do feel like I want to talk about that. And I think I will explain further, but I do feel like it's a valid conversation because I think sneakers has a lot to do with it. And, you know, I just feel like it's a valid conversation. So that being said, I do feel like this is like the longest intro ever and the longest someone has ever been to ever get to their point. So again, forgive me. I have to lock in. I have to get back on track. So that being said, I think we should talk about ITZY and how amazing they are. So in my personal opinion, I believe that ITZY is fine where they're at right now, and I think they are very successful. Sure, you might argue that they're not like charting at number one continuously, and they're not as dominant as they were before, but I feel like when you're under that amount of pressure, I feel like I think it's just hell, right? I feel like if you are under that much pressure with always having to do something that outdoes the last comeback, I think that provides a lot of anxiety. And I think, like, listen, I only got into K-pop in 2022, but I have heard that when the girls were, like, insanely popular and, you know, were at the top of their game in terms of charting and getting views and virality, I think I have heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the girls were, like, facing a lot of hate. And it was just very toxic, in a sense. So I feel like now they're at a point where they have consolidated a fan base, and I think they are just stable, and they have a lot of stability now, and they have a lot of fan loyalty, and I think that's what really matters. Having a tumultuous time in terms of being popular because of how much virality you have, I think that can be very toxic and be very draining as an idol, because people are very hyper-focused on every activity you do, and people are just begging for your downfall. And I think once you have stability and you're not always in the limelight, I feel like that's when true artistry can happen, because when you are kind of seen as the most popular group, you kind of have to maintain that reputation, and you might have to sacrifice artistry to be able to chart well, and you might have to follow trends. And there's nothing wrong with following trends. I think trends exist for a reason, but I do feel like there's a lot more room for ITZY to grow as artists, because now, I mean, in 2024, they also partook in their writing, you know, and I feel like that really shows that they're not just growing up as people, but as artists too. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're free to do whatever they want and they're not under pressure, because trust me, when you are a girl group, you're going to be under immense pressure because you're girls and women, right? It's always going to be hard when you're a woman, when you're a girl. That's not what I'm saying. But I do feel like it's fair to assume that they're not being analyzed and being surveilled and being, I don't know, they're not being, like, as hyper-analyzed as fellow fourth-gen girl groups. You know, I feel like that's fair to say. So I feel like in a way, I don't know how to phrase this, but I do feel like because they're not under a magnifying glass by K-pop stans all the time at this point, like other groups are, I do feel like it has led for the group to explore into more things. And yeah, I do feel like, in my personal opinion, I do have critiques for a lot of ITZY comebacks. I have stuff that I like, and there's stuff that I'm critical about, as one is about literally anything, right? But I do feel like it has led the group to be able to explore in ways that reveal how much they have grown, because I do think that there is a difference between their discography in 2019 and 2020 and now. And this brings me into why the title is a little bit provocative. In my opinion, I do feel like Sneakers was a catalyst to something that many would call the downfall of ITZY. And I don't think they had a downfall. I just genuinely think I think expectations weren't met, and because K-pop fans are very, very, very polarized, and it's all or nothing thinking with a lot of the fan base, I do feel like the girls paid the price for a lack of nuance and a lack of empathy, you know, and a lack of patience. Because again, K-pop fans are coded by the industry to experience music at 100 miles per hour. So obviously, sometimes appreciating or studying or actually genuinely enjoying music kind of goes out the window for some people. And I think because of how fast the music industry, the K-pop music industry goes, I think that also hurt the girls. But I will say this, I don't think Sneakers was a bad song. And that is because I am biased, because I have a lot of nostalgia, because Sneakers is one of the first few songs that I had ever experienced, and I loved it. I loved how colorful it was. I loved the music video. I loved the way the girls danced. I loved their outfits, and I remember just seeing how colorful and just loving the aesthetics of basically everything. So yeah, when I first got into K-pop in 2022, that was one of my first memories, and I will always cherish that. But I do agree, and I do understand if fans do not like it, because the promotional material promised something else, and, like, Sneakers was left field. So this is how I conceptualize the Sneaker situation, that even though Sneakers wasn't a bad song, in my opinion, in the context that it was released in, that's what made it disappointing, and that's what made the comeback itself be, I think Sneakers really overtook the entire project, and when we talk about songs coming out of the Checkmate album, I don't think, I really feel like Sneakers really kind of like overtakes the conversation. So, I know that some people say that it wasn't just Sneakers that led to the quote-unquote downfall of ITZY. It was long before that, and I don't know how to feel about that because I have listened to their discography before Sneakers, and I have loved it, so I don't know, I don't really agree with that sentiment. I mean, I totally see and I hear a lot of those people who do have that take, but personally that's not my experience, so I'm not going to include it in this video. And that brings me to the title of this video being ITZY grew up and that scares us. And the reason why I titled it like that is because this is how I view ITZY. There's ITZY before Sneakers, and there's ITZY after Sneakers. And I feel like a lot of people they still hang on to the pre-Sneakers era. And that is the era where a lot of people were younger when ITZY debuted. And remember what I said about ITZY making tween and teen friendly music at the time, and how Della Della, Wannabe, Not Shy, for example, I feel like that they created a space that was friendly towards teen and tweens. And again, I'm saying this, and I'm sorry if I sound repetitive, but it is a lot of people's childhoods. And you could see them start to grow up by the time Loco happened, for example. And you can see them start to grow up. And you know that, and we all know that, like, during the pandemic, ITZY was doing phenomenally well. View-wise, charts-wise, basically, we know this. But then Sneakers happened, and I don't know. I know from what I heard that Sneakers is very successful in Korea, but not internationally, not for international fans, and I feel like Sneakers was the song that pulled the rug under a lot of fans' feet, and it almost felt like, and again, this is just me putting on a tinfoil hat and speculating, but I do feel like for some stans it became like a halt into like watching their favorite artists progress with them, and it almost felt like regression in a way. But also, not just that, with the promotion and the way it was promoted and the way a lot of people expected a lot of maturity because of the promotional material, I think this also created a polarizing perception and understandably created a lot of mixed feelings. So this leads me into talking about why ITZY growing up scares a lot of fans. And here is me speculating. And again, it's just speculation, it's just an observation, it's just an opinion. I think it's because people correlate ITZY's success to when they were younger, when they would make music like Dalla Dalla, Wannabe, for example. I think that's what they equate them being successful to. And when they stopped making or kind of like change the way they make that specific type of sound, I think for a lot of people, their change in music and the way that their music looked created a change in perception and the relationship with how they perceive ITZY and their music. And, you know, it created this distance. And again, we can always we can always love a group for what they have provided, and sometimes we no longer vibe with that group, and that is completely valid. But I do feel like the group changed the way that they directed themselves, and you can totally see, like, I feel like you can see them start growing up during the Crazy in Love era and going forward. But I do feel like post Sneakers, that's when they truly, like, it kind of cements the fact that they're going into adulthood now, and you see, like, songs like, sorry, I totally blanked out. Imaginary Friend and Tunnel Vision, for example, and Nocturnal. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, forgive me. But that being said, I think post Sneakers is when they really grew up, and a lot of people associate the post Sneakers era with it being their downfall and being their they have completely fell off for some people, and I think it's because ITZY is no longer the group that you grew up with. I do think that kind of scares you a bit because they grew up, you no longer have the same relationship with them anymore, because you have also grown up. In a weird way, growing up and watching your favorite artists grow up is kind of scary, because growing up in general is pretty scary. So I do feel like watching them develop a new sound and explore different sounds, I think it creates this fear that they're no longer the group that you once connected and enjoyed vibing to when you were younger. And I think that opens up a really huge discussion about the fear of growing up and being scared that the things that you once loved aren't going to be the same anymore. And I think the reason why ITZY growing up scares us is because it's uncomfortable. Growing up is uncomfortable, but also watching your favorite artists find a new direction that you might not agree with can feel uncomfortable, and them not looking like the same artist that they once started out as might be a sign that maybe you have grown out of them, or maybe they're on a journey that you don't feel like you can engage with anymore, and that is okay. I think what really hurts is that realizing that you might not be able to enjoy the things that you once loved, and I think that saddens a lot of people, that they might not really enjoy ITZY's music as much because of the direction they've taken. But I do believe that people have really fear-mongered how and have doom posted how much ITZY has failed, but in reality they're not making the same sound that they were when they were like teenagers and in their early 20s. I think we have to acknowledge that sometimes our favorite artists will grow up and they will have a different sound. And yeah, they won't provide the same comfort or the same vibes that they did when you were younger and they were younger, and we have to realize that we will have to engage in our nostalgia, but we also have to learn that there's something so beautiful about growing up and finding your own identity. And I do believe that ITZY is still finding their new identity as a group post Sneakers, and I think that's still a journey. And I do feel like even though some songs for me are hits and misses, I do think this is a journey that ITZY as a group needs to take. And I think it can be scary that your favorite group no longer provides you the same comfort as it once did. But we have to acknowledge that we are growing up and things are not going to be the same. And I feel like doom posting about how unsuccessful they are, I think that really does not help anybody, because they are a part of a big corporation. They're not going to fail. And plus, the girls put their heart into everything that they do. And plus, let me just say this. I'm shocked that people could ever be shocked at the fact that ITZY can be viral. It's just insane to me that people might think that they are totally out of the picture in terms of the K-pop industry. No, they're still there. They're just not being hyper analyzed the way some groups are. And like I will say this, the way Yeji's solo track, the title track for her solo album, like how quickly it accumulated views, it just shows that each of the members hold immense star power. And Yuna's about to have her own solo, and we know that Yuna is a very famous idol, not just because of her visuals, but because of her vibe and her humor. So the members are doing well, and they still have a shit ton of star power. And I do feel like we need to start, like, acknowledging that just because you're not grinding out, like, billions of views instantly, it means that you're not successful. Listen, I think a lot of people's mindset in terms of streaming and charting really comes from, I do think it comes from, I think it's materialistic, but I also feel like it's as a huge relationship to capitalism and how people's self-worth comes from how much money one can make and how much money one can provide to the table. So that being said, ITZY is doing fine, and they're doing beautifully, and they are very successful, and as you can see, they have a song trending right now. They are doing perfectly fine. They have grown up, and that might scare you a little bit, but that's okay, because that means that you and ITZY might not be on the same path in terms of the music that they produce and the music that you consume, but it just shows that even if you don't listen to ITZY anymore, you can still feel comfortable and feel safe to know that your favorite artists when you were younger are going and learning and exploring their identities through music, and maybe even themselves, because ITZY are still quite young. So, that being said, you can take comfort in knowing that even though you don't listen to ITZY anymore, or you don't listen to them as heavily as you used to, I think there's something so comforting watching them explore their identity as adults musically while you are growing up and exploring your own identity and coming into your own person. So I think ITZY growing up shouldn't scare you. I think it should help you to be able to see how much they have grown and you have grown as a person. And you should be proud of yourself, and you should be proud of them, and you should be proud of everyone who has grown with you. So, that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you join me for the next one, and thank you so much for showing my last video a lot of love, and it really means a lot to me, because my videos have not been doing well, but again, that's my fault because I haven't posted in like 84 years, so thank you. Thank you, and I hope that you stick around for more. So thanks and bye now.